There we go. So now time to share my screen. And make sure I have access to, you bear with me for a second, because I have to keep an eye on the waiting room. So I need to put that there. By the way, this is the first time I'm doing this workshop with this many people, so bear the growing pains as we approach it. So, bienvenidos, welcome everyone. So, a little bit about me, about us. So we are Cooked Illustrations. We are a visual communications, science communication company based in Cardiff in South Wales, here in the UK. I'm originally from Panama, and I'm an illustrator by trade, and now I do science communication. So we do everything from graphical abstracts. So this is one we did for a researcher based at University College London. We also do anything that involves visual communication. So comics, reports for bigger pieces of research that need a lot of, report, very big, very boring, very wordy. We turn them into illustrated things that people can engage with at a different level. We also are looking into video forms and animation. So you bear with me for a minute. Oh, apologies. Is there no sound coming through with the video? Oops. I'll make the video available to you. I think we try to sort it out right now. It's going to be a bit annoying. So a little bit of a capsule of what we do and how we can communicate research in many different ways. And this is all depends on who we're talking to and why and how. So graphical abstracts, fellow researchers, institutions, reports, usually for worthy people, but that's something we want to challenge. Who has access to research and why and how? So stop playing. Next one. So here's the learning bit of the workshop. So we're going to go over some terminology. I'm going to explain the terminology as we go along. And if you have any questions, because it's so few of us, put them in the chat and I'll take them as a go. I think it's going to be a bit more interesting if we are making it more interactive rather than me just talking for half an hour. So composition and layout. So these terms can sort of mean the same thing if you ever encounter them. The way I like to explain them is composition is how we flow on an image. So this will make a little bit more sense towards the end. So composition, a flow of information on the image, on the poster, where layout is the way we arrange individual elements. And this is the composition and layout section, which, let's go. Some terminology to understand, some things that could help us design better posters when it comes to composition and layout are things like the rule of 3. So any image that we can divide into is usually this grid of 3 by 3 by 3. So 9, did I do it right? Yes, I can count. And you'll find this tradition comes mostly from photography and filming, where any image that you divide in this aspect will give you a better way to divide elements on the image. So in this photograph that's already been gridded, on the upper left quadrant, it will allow you to create compositions of interest. Again, this is a tool that comes from photography, and I'll try to bring it into the poster design processes. And as you can say, arrangement of elements in areas of the image. And this, so we can have it in the upper left, in the middle, a declarative perspective. Big image in the middle could be like, wow, here I am, declarative, look at me, I'm interesting. Lower right corner, it can mean like, oh, I'm hiding away at the end of something. Next, negative space. So if the black dot that you see is the focus of the image, everything around it, which we will consider empty space, in design called a negative space. And the reason that is understood as negative space rather than just nothing is that you can play around with design elements to actually use that negative space. So it could be one, could be many elements. And to simplify that, we have the artist Ollie Moss, who's perhaps, to me, my favorite graphic designer who uses negative space to design elements around it. So on the image on the left, you see a poster. First thing you see is a gun. And then through the use of the negative space around the gun, there's a face. So the face is the negative space. The gun will be the element. On the poster on the right, it's mostly the silhouette of New York City skyline, being the teeth of the alien skull present there. And if I start bringing some of that composition and layout concept, so the composition of both images, I will say it's, if you were to imagine a straight line going down the middle, that's how the artist wanted us to read. And then the three elements, at least on the poster on the right, of the title in black, the image in red, and then the person in black. Those are three elements laid out along that linear composition. Very well. So these are little elements by American painter Edgar Payne on a book he wrote in 1941, Composition of Outdoor Painting. And then Edgar identified through a lot of landscape painting that there were elements that kept cropping up in terms of composition. And then you can see on the far left of these two images, the simplified version of those compositions. So you have, but can my mouse be seen, by the way? Okay, so you have something like the steel yard up here on the upper left. And then in terms of elements, that big rectangle could be trees, and then a small rectangle to the right, other trees. Simpler one, the O or circular could be a lake, and on and on. And then you can see how composition can be, in its simplest form, a geometrical shape or a line that flows across the page. So other examples, the diagonal line, it's one of my favorite ones. You will see that as hills, mountains. And then you just make the line, slash, and then you add mountains a little bit. Same with the tunnel, silhouette, tree spot, group mass. So these are elements, tools that we could use more broadly to think about what are design elements. Because when we're designing posters, especially on software like PowerPoint, it's like, what do I do? This is a square and a rectangle. What it is? There we go. So here it is how I would sometimes do it really quickly if I were to design a poster. So the composition on the left, the squiggly line, I want people to sort of travel around the page. Then I will personally move to color composition using that shape. And then at the end, the layout, all the elements that I want people to focus on reading. There we go. Which brings us to color, which is a wonderful, beautiful world. That's a whole world unto itself. And then some terminology that you might find when you're designing is hue, saturation, value, and brightness. And then hue is an easy one. That's the color. So that will be your blue, your yellow, your red colors. Saturation is, a way to understand is how much pigment of that color will be, traditionally speaking, if we were using paint. So you see on this color wheel, the outer layer, that will be your hue. And then the closer you get to the middle, the less saturated it is. So you can think from 100% on the outermost area, closer you get, less saturation. Value and brightness, it's more or less if it goes from black to white, it's more of a digital art thing that comes with screens. So it comes in only if you're doing digital art or designing posters. Well, it's all digital, black and white, essentially. Very well. I was gonna talk about different like primary colors, secondary colors, and tertiary colors, but I felt that most of us will have done some basic color theory. So for the purposes of poster design, this is more of a shorthand that I will use if you're designing any posters and you're thinking, what colors do I use? I will usually do complementary colors. So easiest way to understand it is you have the color wheel, you have that triangle, any color opposite of any. So example on the left, if I were to choose to go, I want yellow, my poster. So any color that is purplish and bluish will work really well with that color. Similarly, on the other end, if we go for a purple, anything in that sort of like bottom end of the cone will work really well. There we go. So color composition, this is when we start composing using color itself and how this can talk. These are just images that I put together very quickly to just show that color can be used to create shapes, create form, create rhythm. And again, these are all terms that kind of secondhand to me. So anything kind of doesn't make sense, let me know. But it'll make a bit more sense in the practical part of the workshop. And then the fun one, typography, also known as pain amongst my team. So there's two types of typefaces. These are you might have heard terms like typography, type, font. Typeface and font tend to just be the actual file word. Yes, it's the type we use: Arial, Helvetica, Times New Roman. You will be familiar with them. And they can be divided into two types: serif fonts and sans serif. Essentially, serif fonts have the fancy looking wiggly proper term. All of these fonts have a wiggly line at the end, and sans serif tend to not have them. So a quick example, visual example of what they are. So serif fonts tend to be a bit harder to read, especially there's a lot of text, and they tend, wherein sans serif personally, I find them easier to read. So there's an element of accessibility when it comes to type design, something we can talk about later. And this is the important bit for poster design: text hierarchy and reading order. So text hierarchy is basically in what level of importance. So how text is arranged to create subordination and categorization of spaces. And the spaces we create with text hierarchy can be imaginary, very real, by which I mean, if you see it, you know there is a space there, or that you have the feeling that there's a space just by the way we arrange text in terms of size and importance. So here's a poster by Alexandre Dolezal, which I really like for its beautiful creativity. However, it's kind of hard to look at. It's very busy, it's very colorful. So to explain text hierarchy, we can kind of see it this way. We have the title, the subtitle, the body. So I'm touching the screen rather than moving my mouse, sorry. So we have the title up here, then the subtitle, then we move to the body and this body, and then we can jump to the next box where you have the subtitle and then even a subtitle. So we go back to the original. You can see how the text hierarchy goes from here to here, and it goes to the body, then to the image. Then we can jump to the right where it's a subtitle and then a subtitle. That's essentially text hierarchy. Here's another poster that really exemplifies it really well and very simply, where you have the big title, subtitle being Anne-Marie Carter's, and then you have the subtitles inside the poster itself. Title, subtitle, subtitle body, and it repeats. Reading order. Essentially, where do we want people to go next when they're reading a poster? And this is a favorite example of mine. And can anyone, what does this say? No one wants to read it. Come on, Hannah.
Don't wear pretty on me, my ferret looks.
So this is an example of how the layout of text, in this case, all of these elements in white is a box. Our brains kind of just read it as it is. No matter, we tend to ignore a sentence if the sentence has been divided by a design element. So we will try to read on the left and then jump to this element on the right. So the reading order here is kind of don't wear pretty on me, then we go to fur, and then we go to the body down here. It's a children's drawing that we found online, but it's a good example of what tends to happen when these things are not quite, I want to say that we don't know them, but we don't know them textually enough to make use of them. And to sort of criticize my own work, this is a poster I made for Dr. Erin Dillon a couple of years ago. And the challenge here for me at the time was, in terms of reading order, is I number things. So I will want people to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. However, and this is maybe being a bit too graphic designy geek, is that the odd shapes that I chose kind of create a flow in which from 1, it kind of wants to go to 3, it might go to 4, or it might go to 2. So where I want people to read is not quite clear. However, because it's more of an illustrative poster rather than one with a lot more text, and where reading orders is a lot more important, that is not that big a problem. Very well. So to summarize that bit, text hierarchy is the order of importance, and reading order is how you arrange text so people know exactly where to read next, or where you want them to read next. Also, I pulled up some little tidbits for people who do poster design for printing specifically. So when we're creating large format posters, so we're talking about in the international size system, give me a second, just making sure nobody was on the waiting room. Anything from A1, A0, really big posters, actually A2, A1, and A0, you have these sizes that tends to happen with printing. So A2, you want a titles to be 35 points, subheadings 20 points, and body 16 points. I'll share with you this information with you. You want it's just a little bit of a, when you go to print, this is what happens. However, as we design posters, everything comes down to the message that we are trying to convey, who we're talking to, and where. As we discussed before, if we're talking to researcher for a symposium, that's a very different consideration for the poster design, rather than if we were to talk to lay people, the general public, or another goal that we might have in terms of our communication strategies or our outreach. So I thought that this bit of the talk was going to take a lot longer. I was hoping for a 5-minute break, but I don't think we need it. Very well, unless people need it. So we're going to go to the practical part of the workshop. Anybody has any questions at this stage? Yes, I'll leave the Q&A bit.
I don't have a question. I just want to say that I already find it super interesting. So keep going.
Okay, thank you very much. Very well. So we'll do something. I asked a friend to give me one of her posters, if I can find the tab where I've got it. Can you bear with me for a second? I'm silly, it's this tab. So we got a poster shared by my friend, Dr. Erin Dillon. This is a poster that when we started looking into this question of how do we make better science posters, Hannah and I really struggled with this one at the beginning, because it's just busy, has a lot of graphs, I really will struggle to read any of this on the graph on the left, even if it were a big poster, A0 size at the conference. However, it's also an example of the constraints that sometimes happen when we're doing. Sorry, I just saw a question. 36 by 48 poster. Hannah, could you get that question and see what size that is in the A system in the chat and see if you can find out? Thank you. So yeah, when posters have this many elements and so much to do, what do we do? Where do we start? Well, personally, never use gray. It looks doesn't stand out, but let's use these elements to try to design a poster. So I already got something here to work with, and I'm using Adobe Photoshop. It's the software I have access to, gives us a lot of flexibility. At the end, I'm going to give you a list of open source software, but then again, design principles applicable to anything, even if you're doing it on paper. So as you can see, I have margins and I have a little black box on the outside. By the way, is that showing Photoshop? Got it. Thank you.
Yes, yeah.
So when I'm designing the poster, first things first is if you're thinking, oh, this is going to be printed. Printing has a habit of creating, you have a safe area and the margins. So in this case, if I make this white so people can actually see what's going on, and I am treating the edge as anything outside of that edge will not be printed or could potentially get lost in translation. As in, if there's a little sphere that's very close to the corner that I want to print it, that might be cut off. So to play it safe, I like to create that box. And again, that will depend on your printers and the conditions that you have in place. So that's just a conversation you can have with people on that end. So great, the scariest thing ever, a white page. Where do we go from this? Well, we know that with Erin's poster, we have a lot of these. Okay, computer, don't do what I want you to do. There we go. So bring all the elements into the poster. We have all of these illustrations that will have to be here and stand out. However, we can start seeing some color palettes start showing up, by which I mean repeating elements. So we have these, if I bring the common color there, we have greens and we have yellows and we have blues. So we could decide, okay, those are the colors we're going to work with. That's it, simple to the point. And I will go, great. So I've already thought about this poster a little bit. So I want the composition to be, if I hide all the images for now, I would like people, as we know, in the West, we tend to read left to right and up and down. So maybe we want to do the title up here. Title, and then we want subtitle here. Maybe we want the box full of text here and an illustration bit. So you can quickly see how you can have a composition and the layout like this. My personal recommendation is always do it on paper before you do it on the computer, because when you get to the computer, you can get stuck on detail, and that takes away from the process, and it takes longer, whatever. So I will go, great, I've got a composition. Does it work? I don't know, not yet at least. So we could quickly decide on, let's use, not that one, that graph. Let's use this graph to grab some colors. So that green, let's see how it looks in the background. And then that yellow could be this box. And maybe we want this blue up here as a title box or some description. So if I turn this guiding layer off, they kind of work, But if I zoom out, they're fighting. They're all very saturated colors. And actually, the advantage of doing this on design software that we can see where they are. So on this color picker system that Photoshop and most graphic design software have, anything to the far right, very saturated. Anything to the left, unsaturated. And here's where what I said about value and brightness. You have white and you have black at the bottom. So let's see, that green all the way to the right, that yellow all the way to the right, that blue in the middle. So that's okay. They're just fighting. It doesn't work. So still using the same color, the same hue, we can maybe pull it somewhere around the middle. And that yellow, let's do the same. And they can kind of start to talk to each other a bit better. Again, if we're still using this rule, Hannah and I have, through experimentation, learned that if we are doing posters like what Erin is doing here, which is boxes and boxes on a, in this case, a white background, is that that background is either very dark, relatively speaking, or very bright. Keeping an eye on the chat. Very well. So we can say, let's use this green, make it a bit darker, but not too saturated. Great. Then we have a box and a box. And that title now, because the way we changed the green kind of doesn't work. But if we were to use it to put the title, I need you to bear with me. I'm gonna copy paste the title, paste it again. We'll make it a little bit black. So here's an advice I have: never use 100% black, which depending on the system you're using, could be 0000 on the hex code, different conversation. So I always try to make it off black. And the reason is that any image that has an element that's 100% black or 100% white, that element is going to need all the attention visually. So we have the title. I'll make it big on whatever typeface that Photoshop has decided it is. There we go. So very quickly, I can tell this is not working, just in terms of color. If we go with that black, it's not going to stand out. And that green also is kind of like, eh. So let's just keep it white. That white and that blue and that black kind of work. So again, 100% white, too bright, unless you're being charged by color, I wouldn't use it. So what if we make the background slightly that same blue? A bit more, maybe. Okay, that can work. And let's take it from there. So we have the title. We know we have a lot of text and a lot of illustrations. My criticism here is that because we have so much text that references graphs and illustrations, it just gets difficult to make a choice about what goes where. So as I was preparing for the workshop today, I suddenly had an idea. What if we should let people decide if they want to look at the graphs? By which I mean, okay, what are the important elements that we need to communicate? Title, great. What we're talking about, conservation paleobiology, all the data, the subtitles. Great, that's already been categorized. So I read Erin's poster kind of like title, this bit, then this box, then I move to the right. Let's work with that. So I'll copy subtitle. I'll make that happen, make it smaller. This way. And then really quickly seeing like, oh, maybe that title is too big. Let's make it just for space. Again, this is the process where everything kind of looks messy for a long while. Yep. Now let's grab the, oh, somebody joined. Give me a second. Welcome, welcome. So you missed the, I will say, the theory part of the workshop. So we are doing a bit of trying to make a poster on the fly. So we'll take it as we go. Now we grab all of that text. Whoa, that's a lot of text actually. That's a lot of text. Oh, the challenges of this job. Very good. So right now we're just blocking elements. Where'd you go? There. So I'm not gonna do the whole poster because it might get a little bit too boring. You're looking at me doing all of this, but let's get to the point where it looks a bit nicer. So very well. So we're starting to get an idea of where we want our elements to be. Actually, let's use, where is that image? Is that the graph go? No, that not that one, that one. There. So I had an idea while I was looking at this of separating the title a little bit. And then we do this. And again, this is the flexibility of Photoshop. I've tried to figure this out on PowerPoint. It doesn't quite work. So pardon me. So to make that into the title, then we have the important bit. So which is the description. So if we make it really long to cover the whole poster, it kind of loses weight and presence, putting it up there. So we can keep it as Erin had it up there in the box. Something keeps disappearing, so let's move that. Oh, I had two of those. And giving people an insight into how using Photoshop is. There we go. So that's going to be a title. I could say, I want this to be a box. There. And we have the whole description, which this typeface, I think, works really well. However, because we need to give it a bit more readability, and by which I mean giving it a, what's this called? Space at the top. So yay, now we know where we can read. Let me reference the poster again. Section. So what Erin has done here, and it doesn't let me zoom, is that she has, actually, there we go. So she has a subtitle up here where we use the community survey and systematic literature review to blah, 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 blah. And then we go back out. So in terms of hierarchy, I will actually separate that, put it there just as an example. Give myself a bit more space just to illustrate it. And if we were to do that, that's a bit more readable as a listing in the elements. So we are finding the spaces of things. Come on, Photoshop. There. So example of text hierarchy. Bish bash bosh. It's kind of readable. So, oh, I'm noticing people leaving. So I'm hoping that that's just that they had previous commitments rather than me being very boring.
It's okay. You don't have to worry. It was, I remember someone saying might have to leave in the middle. You know, that
Got it.
thing.
So, come, such joy. This is just not responding to me very well. Very well. So, so we have the graph up there. We have the description here, which nice. We've created our text hierarchy. We want this text to be slightly smaller, just to show that it's part of this top bit there. That goes in the middle. Yay, we've created the skeleton of a poster. But still, it kind of doesn't look right. Of course, it's not finished. I'm going to turn the outer margin off just to see how it will look in big. That blue and blue, nope. Just doesn't work. What if we make it white? It can kind of work. What if we extend it the whole way? Seems to be working. So here's the thing about when we're composing that Hannah and I have to realize is blocks, shapes, objects to separate elements. So let's try a little color composition that we tried the other day in the office. I'm making this top, following that green, a bit brighter, giving it a bit more presence. Let's keep the title. I said, let's put the title up here. Brilliant. See, now that blue may not work. And the white, at least to me, suddenly turned into yellow. I think just the light in the office. Oof. Let me reference this. Yep, subtitles. Again, got a question for everyone. How useful are you finding this section? Because I'll admit, it's the first time we're running the workshop like this, and I kind of feel that this might not be the most useful way to show this information.
I think it is useful more or less to see how you are doing, but probably, at least for me, I would say like the poster, the previous, I mean, let's say the example of the poster that you are now like using as a base is like maybe too complicated to try to do this, like to do it better in a short time, because if we are going to try to like redo everything, could take a bit longer and maybe could be a bit like, yeah, we can lose some kind of attention to this. Maybe if you can just say like, let's focus on how to take 1 or 2 images and try to just make like a mock poster instead of trying to redo everything. But I don't know, this is only my opinion.
Excuse me. It's been seconded. Thank you, Maureen. Give me a second, I'll go. Yes, apologies, because I had requested people to maybe send me examples of their work in progress posters, and nobody had, so I kind of had to scramble to make this happen. Again, it's an experiment. I thank you for your time and your feedback. So, agreed. So let's just focus on, just to finish this section, on this bit on the left of this poster. I just turn this whole thing into a single mock-up real quick, which is kind of nearly finished. Bishop Bash Bosh, we want people to focus on that. Let's put the illustration there. Title, subtitle, body. There. Again, it's just let's treat it as a mock-up real quick. And we can start bringing in those ideas that we discussed earlier. So text hierarchy. We got the title, we'll have the subtitle, which is nothing, but we do need all the PIs and researchers information. Put it small in the corner. Something that we've learned is this information, and correct me if our assumptions are wrong, tend to be there just to say we were here. So in Erin's poster, originally was here in the corner. I personally don't like that. So how we tend to put it in the lower right, meaning it's the last thing people look at regardless. So we'll put it there. This space up here on either side, that I think that's wasted space in the context of a research poster, because you have so much that you could put there and you have the constraint of very little space to do it in the first place. So I personally will say, take advantage of it. Use the whole thing and make it so like, yes, the title goes all across. And then we can put all the investigators that were involved there instead. Let's assume that's taking the whole space. Very quickly, then we want people to focus on this bit on the left. Again, that's where color can work. So by which I mean, let's assume that this is how we are arranging the poster. And then we want everything else to kind of follow that blue palette, by which I mean, let's create it, not that color. That color is disgusting. That color doesn't help either. Something like that. And something like this here. So if we keep it like this, assuming that that's how it's finished, as we read title, this bit subtitle, our brains will kind of glaze over it. It's not important because it's very tiny. So we will go to the next important thing, this here on the left. But because it tends to be aligned with the next bit, they kind of feel like they're part of the same area of information. Simple trick in terms of text hierarchy, move it slightly to the left. It kind of looks now that this whole paragraph is subordinated to the top, which is not quite what we wanted to do. We want this to be its own thing. Let's do a little trick. Let's just make it slightly bigger. And we can make the box that it's under a lot brighter. And now it kind of stands out as its own thing. And then if we make these elements of the same color slightly closer, they kind of look like this whole relationship is kind of all related in one way. This is just a quick example of how color composition can just be implemented to create those spaces of information. And again, in terms of poster design, we're talking about spaces of information. And where do we want people to go depends on what we're trying to communicate. So I'm going to stop doing this and actually going to just answer any questions you might have about posters you have to design or anything really. So I hope you're finding that useful so far. I'm gonna.
Yeah, I think it's super interesting, all the the tips and the details that you are giving us about the color and the arranging. And I have a question, because I have seen, for instance, in some posters, and actually in one, I mean, in the last poster that I did, I mean, sometimes you can put I don't know, like a cartoon or an image that can exemplify a bit what are you doing. But sometimes, for instance, I have set it at the middle and then they put everything in the surrounding. And I think this has to be with what you told us about this tree like division. What would be your suggestion? Like, what is the best place to put it? Because sometimes I was trying, for instance, to put it at the middle, but I felt that it took a lot of space for what I have to put. So what would be, usually when you have these issues, how do you decide where to place these kind of elements?
That tends to be a decision in terms of what, so with a lot of design language is language that we all know what looks right. It's like, imagine if you're trying to read a book in a Western language, but everything starts from right to left. It's not right, it doesn't feel right. So when it comes to illustrations, the shorthand tends to be anything placed in the middle. So if I am the focus of attention, so on the camera. So this is just even if you make it really small, it's going to take a lot of mental attention. But if you move it to here, then you have all of this space over here to draw. So illustrations that are kind of like a cartoon character, just say an animal that you want to talk about, the lower right is nice, because again, remember that we read left to right, up, down. Anything on the lower right will be like, oh, that's the last thing I have to look at. Therefore, if it's something nice to look at, people will either hover on it, go back to the text, or read the text and then hover on it. And that's where there's a principle of design that's kind of, it's rhythm, the rhythm of the poster, the rhythm of the page. So you want people to go, toot, 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 bonk.
Thank you very much.
Let's see, Maureen, trick with the poster. Let's see. The title is a statement of fact. Instead of what is conservation paleobiology to conservation paleobiology is nearing the crossroads. Thank you so much for that, because that poster, we're still trying to figure it out, Erin and I. Very well. Let's see, next, Barty, do you have suggestions about colorblind friendly palettes when designing a poster, or even for figures? Hannah
can help with this.
Hannah has a lot of to say about that.
I did my final project at university on colorblind design. So basically, especially with figures, don't use colors as an indicator. So like if you're like, and if you look at the red bar on this bar chart, the issue is they obviously don't know which one it is. So it's better to use things like textures. So like have like one that's got like dots in it and then one that's got stripes, or other things like use shades of all the same color. So like if you use like 5 different shades of blue, they'll still be able to differentiate between it. This is basically about just making sure you're not relying on the color. It's like basically where you want to be able to see it, like understand what it's saying without having to do like depending on the color. So yeah, it's basically working through that and kind of figuring out that. But yeah, no.
So it also depends on which color blindness you're talking about. So
Yes.
to avoid the problem, like I made a poster for people who cannot see red and green. Oh, what about the other
Yes.
3 types? Is it 3 types of
That's
color
true,
blindness?
yeah.
So if I elaborate on Hannah's thing, is in that case depend less on color and more on shapes, textures, patterns, and differences in saturation and brightness. So something that's very white, something that's very black, something that's very red, or very pink in that spectrum. Hope that helped. Let's see what's the next question. Design a poster for a conference that might not be up to 10. How do you sign your considerations change for a poster when you might be next to it to present to your audience versus a poster that you won't be standing next to? That's an interesting question. That's what we're trying to engage with in terms of posters, because what is the poster for then? So if the poster is being, as you said, if you're going to be there explaining your research, explaining the contents of the poster, I don't think personally that the poster should have a lot of text. It should be more about eye catching and getting people's attention. So should it have more images? Should it have big bold title so that you can capture people and then be able to talk to them and engage with them? That's a different purpose that I'm not going to be at the poster presentation. Therefore, people should be able to read the poster and get 100% of what you're trying to convey. I mean, now we can just say doesn't even have to be 100% of the research or what you're trying to say. It should be enough for people to be curious, interested, and go like, oh, find out more, QR code. So the poster doesn't necessarily have to be the end all be all. It should be a conversation starter, and then that engagement. And that's my suggestion. You're going to be standing next to it all day. You're the interesting thing to be there. The poster used to capture people's. Hope that helped, Caroline. Any more questions, comments?
I've got a question. No one else. Basically, I was just wondering, when making like posters, what kind of programs you tend to use? So there's obviously like a lot of free ones available, and whether you would use ones like PowerPoint or maybe something like Canva.
Are you
Just
asking?
wondering.
You're asking them?
Yes, them. Sorry. To people who make research posters, like what do you tend to use? Inkscape.
Inkscape.
They tried that. Yeah.
Figma. Yeah. Great, that's perfect for us. We've
That's very
been
useful.
trying, because the Adobe is a closed system, so we're trying to figure out how to make it a lot more open source for researchers to be able to do it. PowerPoint, the classic one. We found out that Canva is a lot nicer to design in, and it's compatible with PowerPoint. So we will suggest moving to Canva, maybe, if that's something could be done. So yeah, that's the question on open source software. There's another one I would recommend. It's called Krita, Krita. It's more of a painting software, but it might give you a bit more freedom to design your own graphs and illustrations for your posters and presentations you so decide. Yeah. Very well. Any other questions, comments? Desires for the next workshop? We do want to do more of these workshops, and your feedback has been valuable. So if you have any science communication questions that you would like to approach in the future, this is the time, I guess. Someone just joined. I'm just letting somebody in. So classic mistakes. Ooh. Give me a second, because I actually, from a previous workshop, have a series of really bad posters that might be fun to look at if people still have the time. Poster workshop, there it is. Yes, okay. Allow me a second to pull them up. Very well. So let me go through these questions before we go to the posters. Okay, when do you have the next session? We're having a Spanish version of this workshop next week on the 5th. Afterwards, we'll have a period of, okay, what have we learned? How can we make this better? And we'll announce it through social media and the mailing list. Everybody who signed up to this workshop will get will be added to the mailing list unless they request not to be added to the mailing list. Before and after designs to compare to visualize. Great idea. So let me share some funny bad posters. Just making sure I can still see the chat wherever we went. Come on, Zoom. I know how to use it. There you are. Very well. So, poster 1, it's not terrible, I will say. It does the job. You just need to talk about your research. Bish, bash, bosh. My gripes I will have with this is there is a gradient. I will avoid using gradients on your posters, at least where there's text, just in general. Gradient on the background, like you can see here, it's a radial gradient. It goes from the middle. It works really well here because the person kind of wants, look at my graphs. There it is, right in the middle. So yeah, here, don't use gradients. Let's look at the other ones. One of my favorite ones. Anybody wants to say anything about this?
This makes me feel really good about the posters I've made so far.
Oh no. There's
It's
so much going on.
impossible to read, impossible to know where to start. And my favorite thing about this poster is I do not know why we have a photo of the university up here in the corner. That's where it goes. However, there was an attempt to sort of differentiate between sections. So the red, green, blue, that could be an interesting design decision. However, the constraint here is you have to just too much. This could easily be 3 posters. However, it has an idea. Yeah, don't use the photo of your university. You can. Never seen it before, but there we go. Come on, poster. Nope. Let's see. Where's the next one? So I love this one. It's beautiful. The photograph catches your attention. You go like, I want to learn about frogs. They very tastefully made a gradient so the text stands out. And you can see how I will bet that whoever designed this poster designed all the graphs to match the photograph. So that's something you could do, you go that route. However, mind you, this poster is kind of low quality, the photograph, the JPEG, so it's hard to read. But the elements on the upper left kind of don't have hierarchy. It just, yeah, sorry, doorbell. And when you have a photograph, text becomes very difficult to read. So unless this was printed very big, I will say that's harder to read on the computer. But otherwise, a beautiful creation. Let's see, I have another one that's a terrible poster, which I think it's a joke. What do you say, people? Do you think this is a joke poster?
I hope it's a joke poster.
I think it is, because I think it talks about zero gravity, whatever that, whatever this is. So let's assume that it's not a joke and say, don't use very busy backgrounds, blocks of text, hard to read, boring. Again, text hierarchy. We could say, okay, we read the title, we read the maker of the poster, abstract, grade, introduction, we move right, and then this kind of just starts to get lost. Again, very busy. I swear it's a joke.
The literature cited is leaked internal memo from NASA.
So-
Pretty sure it's a joke.
But this is the funny thing about this one is I've showed it to 3 groups of people, and you're the first one to actually notice elements like that, because most people were like, whoa, that's a terrible poster. And it kind of suggests that some people will accept this to be a proper poster, which talks about how terrible they can be.
The conclusion is our view was that weight and weight gain in space is 0.
Hey, you're engaging with it. Very well. Another one. This is more of an example of a good poster that's using, again, single color background, simplicity, yellow on black, brilliant for accessibility, makes things stand out. And the way they've arranged information. This is just an example of a beautiful, brilliant poster that uses very little elements. I prefer to go with boxes of color, but nothing stopping you of using outlines of a box. And again, so you notice how the main illustrations is in the middle. However, it's slightly off center. That is, so if it was right in the middle, it just wouldn't work. It will take all your attention, but by just moving it slightly down, it suddenly becomes very beautiful and kind of artistic. So let me see, do have another example? No, I think those are all. Have two more. Again, this is a good example of a poster that I kind of love. Right in the middle, lots of illustrations. This is kind of something I had an idea for the poster I was trying to fix, which I'll do at another date, is text line to the illustration being somewhere else. So this is something that could possibly replicate it. You're using a lot fewer graphs, and you say, put all your graphs on one side and then all your text on the left, and they just use lines to tell people, well, I'm talking about that graph and this graph and that graph. And it just tells people, this is the text, so you want the text, here's the graphs where you want the graphs. And then finally, as an example of mistakes, it's this one where the lack of, I would say, boxes and space, let's call it containment space for the text, makes it hard to know where am I starting. Great, you got the title, but the title is floating now because you have these boxes. So your brain kind of like goes to box, 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 wait, there's a title, and then you look up. So if this were inverted in a way that the title is the box, sorry, and then each section were framed either with a color box or an outline, that will work a lot better. Here's a good example of using gradient in the background to kind of guide the eye from darker to lighter. Just tiny little things like that could make your poster from really bad to, oh, that's beautiful to look at. I want to look at that and engage with it. So yes, stopping sharing that. And there were a couple more questions that I missed. Where did they go? Let's see. Yes, graphical abstract design. We haven't done that many graphical abstracts. I think we've done 5. We're not too familiar with the constraints of graphical abstracts from the journal point of view. So not quite, we don't quite know how to answer that question right now. In terms of abstract, I haven't got it, but there's a very hilarious one. It was a piece of research done in the Danube River, where they looked at what fish were addicted to through introduction of drugs into the water. And they basically found out that the fish in the Danube were alcoholic, addicted to crack, and smoked a lot of cigarettes. And they illustrate that as a three-panel comic of the fish doing the 3 elements. So with graphical abstracts, I have the feeling that the journal will have some constraints, but then you can make it very funny, or you can make it a lot simpler. Again, it's something we want to explore more of. So I can't quite help there. There we go. Very well. I hope that answered the question. Yes, we will be sharing the recording once we upload it to you as a YouTube link. It will take us a couple of days, maybe a week to get it up and running, but we'll share it to everyone who couldn't make it to the workshop. Yes. Very well. Any more questions, comments, inquiries? More fluid in the posters info. A more fluid approach to poster design. I think it's possible to do that. Again, it depends on the constraints you set yourself or the constraints of what you're doing with the poster. So if I show the poster we did for Erin Dillon, which was here. Come on, where are you? There it is. Very well, let me share the screen again. So this is a very simple composition in terms of text on top, illustration at the bottom, and the illustration kind of flows through it. So nothing's really stopping you from creating a poster that, wherein this illustration is very, I would say, square, 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 that you decide to flow around the page. And that's just something that you will develop over time. You start doing it. And my best suggestion is just experiment. And experiment with text, experiment with, actually the best way you could do it is just get some cardboard and paper and do it in big, in person. You will feel how that will go in terms of design, and it will stop you from being too detailed with software. But yeah, my suggestion when it comes to flowy elements and composition is that you always follow that rule: left to right, up to down. That's how people read. That's how people try to flow around the page. So you keep to that, great. And I think my other suggestion is, if you're doing text elements inside a box or a shape or a cube, is that the shape the text will then match the shape of what is contained in it. By which I mean, whoop, sorry, where'd they go? So on the upper left, the number 1 box here in the poster, you can see that the text it's not all aligned to the left. It kind of tries to follow the shape of the box. Here too, on the number 3 panel, right in the middle, it kind of helps. And you can play with those elements to that will say, now you read that way. Hope that helps. There we go. Oh, thank you very much. Well, thank you all for coming. And I think, unless I can be here for another 15 minutes, if people want to have a conversation with me, Hannah, you don't have to stay. But yeah, thank you very much for coming to this first workshop we've done. Thank you so much for your comments. And we'll continue to give these talks as we develop them over the next couple months. So one thing, it's kind of cheeky of me, very, very cheeky of me, but we've done this for free. But if you found value in this, we will ask for a donation. Nothing, you don't have to. It could be $1, it could be €1 if you want to. But there we go. We're asking for a little donation if you found it valuable. If not, don't worry, we'll do it again. It'll be better. You can then donate them. Leaving it there. Can. Well, thank you all for coming. It'll be here. So, Erika, you're muted.
As always, right? Thank you very much for the time and all the tips. They were super, super helpful. And yeah, you are doing an amazing job. Thank you.
Gracias.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
There we go.
Well done.
There we go. It happened.
It's okay. It went very well.
Yeah, I'm glad it was just 11 people.
That's kind of nice, isn't it? there'd be so many questions if there were 85 or however many.
Yeah, imagine if it being the 80-odd people that said they were gonna go. That
Yeah.
would have been more opportunities for them to tell me like, you should have prepared better.
Yes.
Fuck off! I'm doing it for free.
Yes.
I'm
Okay.
recording. I just realized.
Oh yeah.